to be the last speaker. I had many notes, and most of them have been revised after listening to the debates until now. So I will try to be extremely functional and practical and focus on what can be done in practice. I completely agree with Timo concerning the long perspective, keeping in mind that the advanced standard that we have achieved in the Nordic countries is the result of a long period of peace between ourselves, and the fact that we have been instrumental in using international law as a tool of cooperation. And both these things are, of course, at risk at the moment. What we saw during the NATO process in Finland, and I will not repeat the excellent comments of Timo, was an extremely hasty process, which gave very little possibility for discussion. As a concrete example, we received the draft in November 2022 and had in practice 9 days to comment on the draft legislation on all issues. And the fact that the conference organizers have highlighted the issue of Sami and the Åland Islands, I think is also a pinpoint that the effects of the militarization and the effects of the erosion of the international legal system are not even. The inequality is not only an inequality in a material sense, it's also an inequality on the effects of the militarization on different parts of countries. So within our discussions in the different countries, I think we should be addressing not only the total national effect, but also the different effects in different parts of the countries. For instance, the long border that Finland has with Russia, what is the effect? What I would like you to keep in mind as the two main messages, I will be repeating them again and again in the few minutes I have, is do not destroy things that already work well. Yes? And the Åland Islands regime, being a demilitarized and an autonomous region which addresses the concerns, both the legitimate interests, both of all countries around the Baltic Sea, as well as the minority concerned, is then an example of such a thing that works. I completely agree with Tuve when she said that we have followed NATO very little. And that has been seen in the discussions that we have seen in Finland. So, don't destroy what works. This means that we in fact do need to discuss in the future things such as what does it really mean, acceptable self-defense. And I give this as a message for the discussion on Sunday, really, that to say self-defense with all possible means is rather problematic with regard to the issue of cluster munitions, for example. So we need to have concrete ideas, but we also need platforms for discussion of the ideas which are not clear yet. So what can be done? I think that in order to keep Timo's positive spirit, and I'm a lawyer, so lawyers take all the bad reputation and are expected to give all the solutions. So I will try to take both roles. But what really has been good in the past year has been that the global diversity framework was adopted by the convention, the Conference of the Parties of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. In this global diversity framework, parties are requested to restore and protect on biodiversity grounds 30% of the territory. And many of the minority areas, many of the areas which are security relevant, have also such very high biodiversity values. At the same time, the International Law Commission, the UN organ which develops international law, has developed its principles on protection of the environment in armed conflict. These are not yet binding, but they have a very strong force within the entire UN system. They are, perhaps you have heard the abbreviation PERAC. Yes, these principles on the protection of the environment in armed conflict say that parties, either individually or collectively, can designate areas of environmental and cultural importance. And I find this very interesting, that the environment and culture are put together as protected zones. So I think that these two things can be used by the Nordic Peace and Environment Society as a whole to designate areas and to work for territorial disarmament, because we already have the experiences of other territorial disarmament efforts, such as the nuclear weapon-free zones around the world, however they work. And we also have very local initiatives, such as the Mayors for Peace network and the Cities Appeal of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. So instead of, I think that I'm propagating for the, let's say, the incremental steps, taking many small steps along all these possibilities that we see. And I very much support then the idea of Nordic as a nuclear weapons-free zone. The Åland Islands is perhaps the only, for the moment, secure nuclear weapon-free zone in the Nordic countries. So as I see the alliance in the future, I see two things: a very short list of goals, minimal goals, but also wide platforms for discussion. At the same time, we need to ensure that our parliaments and our parliamentarians also at the Nordic level discuss NATO, discuss security concepts. And there is a danger in this. Our parliaments are getting intolerant to an increasing degree. So I think having the civil society as a backup solution is in a sense a dual track. But we need to ensure, the problem is that once you are in NATO, the NATO security concepts are not discussed. So when the Åland Islands Peace Institute sent 7 pages of comments on the NATO draft, one of the things that we ask for is that, as in the EU system, we have special discussion possibilities in our parliament, so also for NATO there should be special discussion possibilities. NATO security concepts today do not only deal with military security, they deal also with civil preparedness. And in that, they can deal with all matters, including the environment and environmental crisis. And there needs to be much more discussion. So I welcome you all to the webpage of the Peace Institute, peace.ax. The comments to NATO have only been in Swedish until now, but let us know if you need some summary in English. I think most can read. I also think that the Norwegian International Commission of Jurists' comments concerning the NATO bases should be distributed more widely, because we need to learn from the Norwegian experiences for the discussions coming up in Denmark and Finland. And it is Mikael Antell who is heading Mikael Lantell is the Finnish ambassador who is heading the negotiations on the American bases in Finland at the moment, and he was former ambassador in Norway. So there is a close link between the discussions in Finland and those going on in Norway and those going on in Finland. Thank you very much for your attention.